My name is Karina Michelle, and in this video I'm going to tell you all about powder brow tattooing. So what is a powder brow tattoo? This is a form of permanent makeup that is done with a tattoo machine that is creating a soft shaded brow. So there's actually no hair strokes or anything. It is done with a rotary pen that's specifically designed for permanent makeup, so there's very little vibration and very little trauma to the skin. And then we use a single needle, which is in a sterile cartridge, so everything is very, very safe. Essentially, this technique is designed to create just a soft shaded brow. It's very, very natural. You can do really defined, or you can keep it really, really soft borders if you want. It's really up to the individual and has a lot to do with just your makeup routines and what you prefer to do every day. Make sure that if you do have any prior permanent makeup that you have us check it first, because we might not be able to cover the old permanent makeup tattoos. If this is your first time visiting us for a powder brow, it actually comes with 2 sessions. So the first session is going to be about an hour and a half, and then when you come back in 4 to 8 weeks, we'll complete a second session. And this is really just like a perfecting appointment. It's usually about 15 minutes to 45 minutes, just kind of depending on what we're doing. Usually it heals like 90% perfect the first time, and then when you come back, we'll just do any kind of tweaking. Maybe it chipped off a little bit, maybe you want to go a little bit darker, maybe you want the tails a little bit longer, whatever we need to address, we'll do at the second session. Does the powder brow tattoo hurt? Pain is very, very minimal with this technique. So I don't use any pre-numb. I actually do a first pass with no numb on both brows. This is because it goes in the skin much better when it's really, really dry. After I get the first pass done, we do add a numbing gel, and this one kicks in really, really fast because it goes in open skin. I would say most people fall asleep, so pain is very, very minimal, and it's nothing that you have to be afraid of. How long does the powder brow last? Now this can be anywhere really from like 1 to 5 years. I know this is a very broad range, but it really just depends on a lot of factors. Your age, skin type, the color that we use, how heavy we saturate the brow, your lifestyle, how often you're in the sun. The sun's a big fader, medications that you might be on, everything kind of plays a factor. I will say though, you kind of want this technique to fade. This technique is designed to fade faster. It's not meant to be super permanent, and that's because colors get really dingy as they get old. We want the color to fade, and that way in a few years you can always come back and get a touch-up and have new fresh color put back in the skin. People always ask how often they should get touch-up. So it really just depends on the person, and I want you to focus not so much on the time and more on the color of the actual tattoo in your skin, which is very different for everybody. So if it's been a year, 2 years, whatever, and it's completely gone, by all means come back in. But if it's been 1 or 2 years and it's just a little bit lighter, maybe you just want to darken it with makeup a little bit, then just do that for a little bit longer. Give it some more time to fade. The more faded it is, the more fresh color you're able to get at the touch-up, and the more natural it's going to continue looking. If you touch it up too often to the point where you're just oversaturating it, it's going to lose that really powdery naturalness to it, and it's going to start to look like one of those solid brows, which we don't want. So you want to kind of give it a good amount of time in between to keep a very natural result. Remember, permanent makeup is not necessarily a replacement for makeup. It's more of an enhancement for makeup. So think of it as something that you can easily build on. If you want to do like a really, really intense brow, you can always put makeup over the powder brow tattoo to really intensify it. However, if you're somebody who likes something really, really natural and really, really soft, then you'll probably be happy with this and you might not have to wear makeup anymore. So it just depends on the individual and what your preference is. If you do have to wear, after a few years, maybe it's a little bit faded and you kind of want a more intense, bold brow again, that doesn't mean you necessarily should get a touch-up. Maybe you should just start wearing makeup again, and it'll be really easy because you can trace over the old tattoo, and so you're not really starting from scratch. So it's very, very low maintenance regardless of how often you're getting touch-ups. Okay, now you have your appointment booked and you're ready to come in. Here are some things to remember before coming in for your appointment. Do not take any blood thinners for 24 hours before your appointment. This includes coffee, alcohol, pain medication, fish oil, and vitamin E pills. These will all thin the blood. You don't want to bleed during your appointment, because if you do, the blood will push out the ink that we just put in there. Typically though, nobody bleeds. It's very, very rare. If you do bleed, it's usually because of a medication that you're taking frequently, not because you accidentally had coffee, but just keep these things in mind to make the results as best as possible. Do not wax or tweeze before your appointment. Just kind of let everything grow and, as natural as possible. We like to see where your skin naturally is, or where your hair actually grows, because we want to keep everything in the shape as much as possible, and then we will tweeze it and remove what we want to remove. You can come with or without your makeup on for your appointment. If you want us to see how you do your makeup every day, to replicate, then that's totally fine. We're gonna end up cleaning it all off anyways. But if you wanna come in with nothing, and that way we can just start from scratch, then that's totally fine too. So whatever you really wanna do, either way. If you do wear makeup every single day on your brows, sometimes I do like to see how you do your makeup, because that lets me know what you're used to and what you're not so much afraid of getting done. It's best to avoid Botox before your appointment if you can. The reason is Botox will sometimes make your brows sit funny. Sometimes one will go a little bit higher than the other. Sometimes they might both be really peaky, or they both might droop from the Botox. So if your brows are a little uneven from the Botox, and then we tattoo the brows to make them even, once the Botox wears off, the brows, now the tattoo might look crooked. So you really want to kind of let your skin just kind of settle down and have all the Botox worn away before you get the tattoo. After you get the tattoo, you can get Botox, it's no big deal. That way the shape's already there. If you're someone who gets Botox all the time to the point where you don't really get any lifting done, it's just kind of, no movement, then you don't really have to worry about this. So just kind of pay attention to your forehead nerves and how you actually move with the Botox in order to figure out whether you should book your appointment now or wait, the good 3 months for the Botox to wear off. Now I'm gonna go over the aftercare for the powder brow tattoo. So at first they're gonna be a little bit bold, nothing crazy, you don't have to take off work or anything. It's really not as bad as people think it's gonna be. It'll just look a little bit more like you have makeup on, and then it will kind of flake off after a few days. So just kind of expect that. On blondes, it can be a little bit warmer, which is a little bit less desirable for blondes, but I promise it does heal, like a nice taupe that you kind of want it to do, nice and ashy. It will be a little bit dry and itchy. Just make sure you don't pick it and don't scratch it. If you see any flakiness on the brows, if you pull that skin off, it'll just remove the ink with it, and then can kind of ruin the tattoo and cause infection, so just leave it alone. I will give you an aftercare kit afterwards, and it will have a moisturizer and a soap in it, and this will also help with the dryness and the itchiness. It will flake off after a few days. Flaking is very, very minor. Most people don't really get much flaking at all. It's just kind of like a light dandruff, if anything. Occasionally, if you have really thick, oily skin, you might get some big chunks. Just make sure you don't pick it, just leave it alone. But even that is very, very rare. I would say most people don't get much flaking at all. Make sure you're not sweating after this, after your procedure. The saline and the sweat will remove the ink from the skin. So for 7 to 10 days until you're done flaking, no working out, no saunas, no hot tubs, don't do anything like that, and just try to stay indoors if it's gonna be really hot outside. No sun for 4 weeks, and this is just like tanning and stuff. If you know you're gonna be outside for a long time, just wear a hat, and no makeup on the brows. So no makeup on the actual eyebrow, but then just kind of really stay away, like foundation and eyeshadow, because you don't want any bacteria getting in it and causing an infection. In your aftercare kit, you will have an instruction manual, and you'll also have your soap and your cleanser, your soap and your cream. So when you first leave, you're not gonna wet the brows for 24 hours. You kind of want the skin to close before you start wetting it. So just make sure you shower before you come in and wash your hair before you come in, and that way you don't have to worry about getting them wet for the first 24 hours. I'm gonna give you a gauze in the kit, and it's going to really be for when you first leave, just to kind of dab the brows a little bit. You might have some lymph fluid coming out of the skin, which is just the natural oils from the skin, and you don't want that to sit there and dry. So you can just kind of take that gauze and dab it if you notice anything, but don't stress about this too much. It's really not a huge deal. It's just in there if you need it. 24 hours, no water at all. Remember that. After 24 hours, you will start washing it with the cleanser. It's the pink one, it says cleanser on it. Make sure you always wash your hands first, make sure they're nice and clean. Squirt a tiny bit of cleanser on and really gently wash the brows. Do not scratch, do not be really aggressive with it. You wanna make sure that you're being very gentle. After you wash it, always pat it dry with a clean tissue or gauze. Don't use anything with bacteria and nothing abrasive. After you wash it, you're going to put the cream on. Now the cream is different for everybody as far as how often you use it. So if you have very oily skin, you don't want to use much of this. You could use it maybe like every other day, maybe just at nighttime, or maybe just kind of feel for if you even need to use it at all, because you do want your skin to be a little bit on the drier side. If you have dry skin, then you might want to use this a little bit more often. You might want to use it every time you wash if the soap is really drying out your skin, or you might just want to use it at nighttime. Just feel it out. Everybody's kind of different, so just know that less is more with this. You never want to use too much of this because dry skin does heal better. In your aftercare booklet, you will have an instruction manual. Everything I just went over is pretty much on the eyebrow side, and on the other side is going to have all of the rules. And the rules are, don't pick it, don't sweat, just make sure the water pressure isn't hitting your face in the shower. You don't want, if it's really strong, to irritate it. Not too hot or steamy showers, and then don't be in the shower for a really, really long time because you don't want your skin to get like super gummy. So ideally just kind of keep it as dry as possible. And then whenever it gets wet, whenever you wash them or whenever you shower and it gets wet, just make sure you're always kind of dabbing them dry afterwards with a clean tissue. No makeup, sunscreen, or lotion, nothing on the actual brows. Only use the stuff that we give you for the first week. Once it's completely healed, you can kind of go back to your normal routine. Just make sure you always stay away from like retinols and chemical peel stuff. No swimming, hot tubs, or saunas. Don't do anything that's gonna get like bacteria directly in it. I always recommend sleeping with a clean pillowcase. Try to sleep on your back, but at least if it's clean, you're not rolling around in bacteria. And stay away from any facials or anything for 4 weeks. You wanna make sure everything is like really healed before you start irritating it. On the very bottom of the list, you will find a list of things to always avoid, and this is basically forever, even after it's healed. This is going to be retinol creams, chemical peels, laser treatments, acids, any sort of like chemical exfoliant. You can still use all of that stuff, just really kind of work around the brow, don't put anything directly on top. And definitely do not put a laser on it because the laser will just kind of instantly remove it or mess up the tattoo. So with all procedures, there are risks, and I wanted to go over a few of the risks of the powder brow tattoo. The biggest one is just the lasers. Just make sure you never put a laser on it. So if you ever do any sort of face type procedure that involves a laser, just make sure you tell them not to hit the actual eyebrow. If they actually hit the eyebrow, it will most likely remove it or it can mess up the color. Another thing is just keep in mind that there's no guarantees in the color, and typically these pigments, they tend to just get a little cool after they age, which is no big deal. Usually when you come back for your touch-ups after a few years, we're just adding a little bit of a warmer color just to kind of balance it out. And with all tattoos, there's always a risk of infection, so just make sure you're always following the aftercare instructions and really make sure everything is staying nice and clean. Just a reminder of all the people who cannot get permanent makeup. If you have old permanent makeup, you need to get approval first, make sure that we're able to cover it. You cannot get any tattoos if you are pregnant or nursing, if you have been on chemotherapy or Accutane in the last year, if you have been on antibiotics in the last 3 months, if you are hemophiliac, certain immunodeficiency disorders, if you have been using lash growth serums on the brows, make sure that you stop using those serums at least 3 to 6 months before your appointment. And if you have autoimmune diseases, will require a doctor's note of approval, and this includes diabetes. I hope that this video answered all of your questions about the powder brow, and please feel free to reach out if you have any more questions, and you can always find more information on my website, karinamichelle.com.